Most men think women are attracted to looks, money, or status. They're wrong. High value women are repelled by patterns, subtle behaviors that quietly scream insecurity, emotional instability, and lack of self respect. And the dangerous part? Most men don't even realize they're doing it. Today, I'm going to tell you exactly what makes you unattractive to high value women, not in theory, not in cliches, but in real psychological terms that actually determine attraction. Listen carefully, because fixing this changes everything. Neediness disguised as niceness is one of the most common attraction killers, precisely because it hides behind behavior that looks morally good on the surface. It shows up as excessive politeness, constant availability, over-agreeableness, and a fear of being disliked. Many men confuse this with emotional intelligence or respect, but what it actually communicates is a deep discomfort with their own worth. When a man's behavior is driven by the desire to be approved of, rather than the confidence to be authentic, the interaction stops feeling natural and starts feeling performative. A woman can sense when kindness is freely given versus when it is being used as a strategy to secure affection, and the latter creates pressure rather than connection. This type of niceness is rarely about the woman herself. It is about the man's internal anxiety. He is constantly scanning for cues. Did I say the right thing? Did she smile? Should I reply faster? And adjusting his behavior in real time to avoid rejection. Instead of expressing his genuine thoughts, he filters them. Instead of setting boundaries, he suppresses them. Over time, this creates a subtle imbalance where the woman feels placed on a pedestal while the man shrinks himself to maintain proximity. Attraction requires polarity, and polarity disappears when one person is trying to mold themselves into whatever they think will be accepted. What makes this especially unattractive is that it places an emotional burden on the woman. When a man is overly nice because he needs reassurance, she becomes responsible for regulating his self-esteem. Her reactions suddenly matter too much. If she pulls back, he feels hurt. If she doesn't reciprocate enthusiasm, he becomes insecure. Even neutral behavior is interpreted as rejection. This dynamic doesn't feel romantic. It feels like caretaking. High-value women are drawn to men who add emotional stability to their lives, not men who quietly demand it through constant approval-seeking behavior. Neediness also reveals itself through the inability to tolerate discomfort. A man who is nice out of fear avoids disagreement, avoids tension, and avoids expressing desire directly. He would rather hint than state, wait than lead, comply than risk disapproval. While this may appear respectful, it often masks a lack of self-trust. Attraction thrives on grounded presence, the sense that someone can stand in their choices without needing constant validation. When a man collapses under the possibility of being disliked, it signals fragility rather than depth. Another subtle issue with this form of niceness is that it creates resentment over time. When a man continuously gives without being honest about his needs, he begins to feel unappreciated. This resentment leaks out as passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, or sudden frustration that seems disproportionate to the situation. From the woman's perspective, the shift feels confusing and unsafe. What once looked like kindness now feels unstable because it was never rooted in genuine self-respect to begin with. True confidence allows kindness to exist without expectation. A secure man can be generous, attentive, and considerate while remaining emotionally independent. He doesn't offer care as a bargaining chip, and he doesn't collapse when it isn't returned in the way he imagined. He understands that attraction grows when two whole individuals meet, not when one person tries to earn worthiness through self-erasure. Lack of emotional regulation is often misunderstood as emotional depth or sensitivity, but in reality, it communicates instability rather than openness. When a man reacts impulsively to stress, rejection, or uncertainty, his emotions begin to control the environment instead of being processed internally. Sensitivity implies awareness and responsibility for one's feelings, while emotional dysregulation suggests that emotions spill outward, unchecked. High value women are not afraid of emotion, they are wary of emotional volatility. They instinctively assess whether a man can experience strong feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them, because this determines whether he can provide emotional safety in a relationship. When emotions are not regulated, even small situations feel heavy. A delayed reply triggers anxiety, a disagreement becomes a personal attack, and a minor setback turns into a mood shift that dominates the interaction. This creates a sense of walking on eggshells, where the woman feels she must manage his emotional state to keep things calm. Over time, she learns that her words carry too much weight, that her honesty might cause an emotional spiral, and that her independence may be perceived as abandonment. What initially looks like emotional openness slowly reveals itself as emotional dependency, and dependency erodes attraction because it removes the sense of grounded presence. Emotional dysregulation also distorts communication. Instead of expressing feelings clearly, the man reacts through tone, withdrawal, or intensity. He may become defensive when confronted, overly reactive when challenged, or shut down when uncomfortable. These patterns make conflict unsafe, not because disagreement is harmful, but because it becomes unpredictable. A woman needs to know that she can express herself without triggering an emotional collapse or explosion. Regulation doesn't mean emotional suppression. It means the ability to feel deeply while remaining anchored. Without that anchor, emotions become something that happens to him rather than something he consciously navigates. Another consequence of poor emotional regulation is inconsistency. A man may be warm and attentive one moment, distant or irritable the next, depending on his internal state. This inconsistency disrupts trust. Attraction grows when behavior is reliable, not when it fluctuates based on unprocessed feelings. Sensitivity paired with self awareness creates intimacy. Sensitivity without regulation creates confusion. The woman is left trying to decode what version of him will show up, and that uncertainty prevents emotional closeness from deepening. Unregulated emotions often stem from unaddressed wounds, past rejection, abandonment, or invalidation that was never processed. Instead of being reflected on, these experiences live in the nervous system, ready to be activated by present situations. When triggered, the man responds from past pain rather than present reality. This is why reactions feel disproportionate and intense. High value women recognize this pattern quickly, not because they lack empathy, but because they understand that healing is a personal responsibility. Compassion does not mean tolerating emotional chaos. True emotional strength lies in the ability to pause, reflect, and respond rather than react. A regulated man can acknowledge hurt without projecting it, express concern without accusation, and face discomfort without losing composure. This creates a sense of safety that allows attraction to flourish naturally. Emotional maturity is not the absence of feeling, it is the capacity to hold emotions without letting them dictate behavior. Over-validation and people-pleasing often appear generous and supportive on the surface, but beneath that behavior sits a quiet discomfort with one's own value. When a man constantly affirms, agrees, and accommodates, not because he genuinely wants to, but because he fears disapproval, he is signaling that his sense of worth depends on external acceptance. Attraction is deeply tied to self-perception, and when a man treats approval as something he must earn, it communicates that he does not already believe he is enough. High value women are attuned to this dynamic because confidence is felt long before it is proven. People pleasing usually develops as a coping mechanism. At some point, the man learned that being agreeable, helpful, or emotionally available, reduced conflict, or increased acceptance. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. He anticipates what others want and adjusts himself accordingly, often before being asked. While this may look thoughtful, it removes authenticity from the interaction. When every response is filtered through the question, "Will this make me liked?" the connection becomes transactional. Attraction fades when a woman senses that she is interacting with a version of a man designed to please rather than the man himself. Excessive validation also places the woman in an unbalanced position of power. When compliments are constant, reassurance is endless, and admiration feels one sided, it stops feeling special. Value is created through selectivity, not saturation. When a man validates everything a woman says or does, it suggests he lacks his own internal standards. Instead of meeting her as an equal with discernment and boundaries, he positions himself as an audience seeking approval. This dynamic subtly erodes respect because attraction requires mutual grounding, not emotional elevation of one person over the other. Another issue with people pleasing is the suppression of personal needs. When a man habitually puts others first, he often neglects his own limits, desires, and opinions. These unmet needs do not disappear, they accumulate. Eventually, they surface as frustration, withdrawal, or passive resentment. From the woman's perspective, this shift feels destabilizing. The same man who once seemed endlessly accommodating now appears distant or irritable, and the change feels unpredictable. What began as overgiving reveals itself as emotional dishonesty, not because the man intended to deceive, but because he never allowed himself to be seen fully. Overvalidation can also create emotional pressure. When a man constantly reassures, compliments, and affirms, he may unconsciously expect reciprocation. If the response doesn't match his level of giving, he feels undervalued. This creates an invisible contract that the woman never agreed to. Instead of allowing attraction to develop organically, the dynamic becomes one of emotional accounting. High value women sense when validation is being used as a tool rather than offered as a reflection of genuine appreciation. Self worth is reflected in the ability to give without erasing oneself. A man who values himself can be kind, supportive, and attentive while remaining rooted in his own identity. He does not need constant affirmation to feel secure, and he does not fear disagreement or disapproval. When validation comes from a place of abundance rather than insecurity, it feels grounded and meaningful. When it comes from self-doubt, it quietly communicates that the man is asking to be chosen rather than standing as someone worth choosing. The absence of purpose does not create mystery, it creates emptiness. Many men believe that saying little, drifting through life, or appearing emotionally detached makes them intriguing, but without direction, this detachment feels hollow rather than deep. Mystery is born from depth and intention, not from vagueness. When a man lacks a sense of purpose, his presence carries no gravity. Conversations feel unanchored, decisions feel reactive, and his energy feels scattered. High value women are drawn to men whose lives are moving towards something, even if that something is still evolving, because movement itself signals vitality. Purpose is not about status or grand ambition. It is about having an internal compass. A man with purpose knows what matters to him, how he spends his time, and why he makes certain choices. When this is missing, a woman senses it immediately. Without purpose, a man becomes overly focused on her reactions, her availability, and her validation. His attention drifts outward instead of being anchored inward. Rather than feeling chosen, the woman feels studied, as though she is the only source of meaning in his world. This creates pressure instead of attraction, because no one wants to carry the weight of being someone else's direction. A purposeless man often confuses passivity with calmness. He may avoid taking initiative, delay decisions, or move through life in a state of waiting. waiting for motivation, waiting for clarity, waiting for something to happen. This waiting energy is felt in relationships. Plans are vague, leadership is absent, and momentum is lacking. While mystery invites curiosity, passivity invites boredom. Attraction thrives on presence and engagement, on the sense that a man is actively participating in his life rather than observing it from the sidelines. Without purpose, identity becomes unstable. A man may mirror the interests, opinions, or lifestyle of the woman he is with because he has not yet defined his own. This adaptability might look flexible, but it often signals a lack of self definition. When a man shifts too easily to fit another person's world, he becomes indistinct. High value women are not looking for someone to blend into their lives. They are drawn to men who bring a world of their own. Purpose creates contours to personality. Without it, everything feels flat. The absence of purpose also weakens emotional presence. When a man does not feel engaged with his own life, he struggles to be fully present in connection. His energy feels distracted, unfocused, or low. Even affection can feel hollow because it is not grounded in a fulfilled inner life. Attraction is amplified when a man's interest in a woman is an addition to his life, not a replacement for meaning. Purpose gives context to desire. Without it, attention feels clingy rather than intentional. Mysterious men are not empty, they are contained. They speak less because they are occupied, not because they are lost. Their silence has substance because their lives are full. When a man is aligned with his purpose, he does not need to perform intrigue. His direction, discipline, and sense of self create a quiet confidence that naturally draws interest. In contrast, a lack of purpose leaves nothing for curiosity to attach to, making the man fade into the background of experiences rather than standing out within them. Entitlement to female attention subtly undermines masculine polarity because it replaces grounded presence with expectation. When a man believes that attention, affection, or desire should be given to him simply because he exists, tries, or behaves correctly, the dynamic shifts from attraction to obligation. Polarity thrives on choice, not demand. A woman's interest must feel freely given, not extracted through pressure, guilt, or invisible contracts. The moment a man feels owed attention, his energy tightens, and that tension is felt immediately. This entitlement often disguises itself as frustration or confusion. A man may think, I've done everything right, so why am I not getting the response I deserve? This mindset turns interaction into a transaction. Instead of being present, curious, and self-directed, he begins to monitor outcomes. He measures effort against reward, kindness against affection, and time against validation. Masculine polarity dissolves in this space because attraction is no longer arising from authenticity. It is being negotiated. High-value women are particularly sensitive to this shift because it signals insecurity rather than confidence. When entitlement enters the dynamic, it also distorts behavior. A man may become impatient when attention is not immediately reciprocated, resentful when a woman prioritizes her own life, or passive-aggressive when expectations are unmet. These reactions communicate a lack of emotional self-sufficiency. Polarity depends on contrast, strength meeting softness, direction meeting receptivity. Entitlement flattens this contrast by pulling the woman into a defensive position where she feels the need to protect her autonomy rather than lean into attraction. Another way entitlement erodes polarity is through overexposure. A man who feels entitled to attention often over-initiates, over-texts, or over-explains. Instead of allowing space for desire to build, he floods the connection with presence. This removes tension, and tension is essential for attraction. Masculine energy naturally holds space, it does not chase it. When a man cannot tolerate absence or silence, it reveals discomfort with himself. High value women interpret this as emotional hunger rather than interest. Entitlement also interferes with leadership. A man who expects attention often looks to a woman for emotional regulation, validation, or direction. He reacts to her mood instead of setting the tone. Polarity requires that a man be rooted in his own frame, able to move forward regardless of external response. When his sense of worth rises and falls based on female attention, he gives away his center. Without a center, there is nothing for a woman to respond to. At its core, masculine polarity is about self contained energy. A man who is fulfilled, purposeful, and internally validated does not need attention to feel whole. When he offers attention, it feels intentional and selective, not desperate or demanding. A woman feels free to respond because there is no pressure. Desire thrives in freedom. Entitlement removes freedom by turning attention into an expectation rather than an invitation. And in doing so, it quietly dismantles the very polarity that makes attraction possible. Unhealed trauma does not stay contained within memory. It expresses itself through behavior, tone, and emotional patterns, often without conscious awareness. Many men believe that time alone heals wounds, but unresolved experiences continue to live in the nervous system, shaping reactions long after the event has passed. When trauma remains unprocessed, it quietly dictates how a man perceives intimacy, safety, and connection. High-value women may not know the details of his past, but they can feel its presence in how he responds to closeness, conflict, and vulnerability. One of the most common ways trauma leaks out is through hypervigilance. A man who has experienced rejection, abandonment, or emotional neglect may constantly scan for signs that history is about to repeat itself. A delayed message feels threatening, a change in tone feels personal, and independence feels like distance. These interpretations trigger protective behaviors, withdrawal, control, emotional shutdown, or excessive reassurance seeking. What begins as self-protection becomes relational strain. Attraction weakens when interactions are filtered through fear rather than curiosity, because fear creates rigidity instead of flow. Unhealed trauma also distorts boundaries. Some men become overly guarded, keeping emotional walls so high that genuine intimacy cannot form. Others swing in the opposite direction, attaching too quickly and seeking closeness as a way to soothe old wounds. Both patterns disrupt attraction. Emotional unavailability feels cold, while emotional overexposure feels overwhelming. High-value women seek balance, the ability to connect without collapsing into dependence or disappearing behind defenses. Trauma-driven behavior makes consistency difficult, and inconsistency erodes trust. Another way trauma reveals itself is through disproportionate reactions. When present situations activate past pain, responses often exceed the reality of the moment. A minor disagreement may provoke defensiveness, anger, or withdrawal because it taps into an unresolved memory of being unheard or powerless. These reactions feel confusing to the woman who experiences intensity without understanding its origin. Over time, she learns that honesty carries risk and emotional expression becomes constrained. Attraction requires emotional freedom, and trauma-driven reactivity quietly removes it. Trauma also affects self-perception. Men carrying unresolved wounds often struggle with shame, inadequacy, or a fear of being unlovable. These beliefs influence how they show up in relationships. They may seek constant reassurance, test loyalty, or sabotage connection before it deepens. Even when affection is present, it feels fragile, as though it could disappear at any moment. This fragility creates tension. High-value women are drawn to emotional solidity, the sense that a man can receive love without questioning its permanence. Healing is not about erasing the past. It is about integrating it. A man who has faced his wounds develops emotional awareness rather than emotional avoidance. He can recognize triggers without being controlled by them. His responses become measured and his presence becomes grounded. Trauma that is acknowledged loses its power to leak into behavior. Trauma that is ignored continues to shape interactions from the shadows. Attraction grows when a man takes responsibility for his inner world because emotional accountability creates safety, and safety allows desire to unfold naturally. When you look at all of this together, a clear pattern emerges. What repels high value women is not imperfection, struggle, or emotional depth, it is unconsciousness. Neediness masked as niceness, emotional volatility mistaken for sensitivity, people pleasing in place of self worth, lack of purpose dressed up as mystery, entitlement to attention, and unhealed trauma all share one root problem: a man who is not anchored within himself. Attraction does not grow from performance or approval seeking. It grows from inner alignment. A man becomes compelling when his behavior is guided by self-respect rather than fear, and by responsibility rather than expectation. High-value women are drawn to emotional safety, grounded presence, and intentional direction. They are not looking to fix, complete, or regulate a man. They are looking to meet one. When a man does the inner work, builds purpose, regulates his emotions, and takes ownership of his wounds, his energy shifts naturally. He stops chasing attraction and starts embodying it. Masculine polarity, confidence, and depth are not traits you adopt. They are outcomes of internal stability. The moment a man becomes whole within himself, attraction stops being something he tries to create and becomes something that responds to who he already is.